De Bende van Nevel, the Brabant Killers. First there was Le Jean, the giant. Then came Le Tueur, the killer. And finally, Le Vieux, the old driver. An unholy trinity of murderous scourge who ravaged the Belgian province of Brabant between 1982 and 1985. In Wallonia, the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, they are called the Mad Killers of Brabant. In Flanders, the French-speaking part, they are known as the Gang of Neville. They rained violence on Brabant, attacking, maiming, and murdering with barbaric abandon. Here's the kicker. No one knew who they were. In the 3 years of their evil reign, the Brabant Killers would gun down 28 people in cold blood and leave a further 22 injured in the numerous crimes, mostly limited to a certain Belgium locale, with only one sighting recorded outside Belgium in another French-speaking nation. Death and trauma followed wherever they went. Men, women, and children all fell to their bullets, and people lived in dread of the Gang of Three, who disappeared without a trace in 1985. There is a heavy blanket of mystery hanging over the group and their activities, and till today, the Belgian police continues their search for the elusive killers. In this video, I will try to answer the unanswered questions, digging deep into the lives of these dangerous men in a bid to unmask them. Spoiler alert, we will fail, but here is one thing we are certain about. We will show you all we know, dive into all the theories of their identities and possible affiliations. So, kick back and relax as I take you on this journey through the dark and gory days in Brabant. Please remember to click the like button and subscribe to my channel to enjoy more videos like this. Ready? Let's dive in. First contact. On the 31st of March, 1982, 2 men armed with a 12-gauge shotgun robbed a store in Dinant, Belgium. It was the first time this gang of men will appear in the consciousness of the community. Less than 2 months after this, an Austin Allegro and a Volkswagen Santana were stolen. The Allegro was stolen at gunpoint, but there was something different about this particular theft. It was one of the few times a member of the gang, the killer, was seen without a mask on. Eyewitnesses say he spoke fluent French and sounded like an educated man. The name Gang of Brabant came to be used in discussing the group at this time, both in the media and police, and among people in the community. The first bloody altercation between the gang and members of the police force came on the 14th of August, 1982. The gang had finished robbing a grocery store in Maubeuge, France, and were loading their loot into the getaway vehicle when 2 French police officers arrived on the scene. What ensued was a deadly shootout that resulted in serious injuries for the officers, while the gang members escaped unhurt. This was to be the first of what some have considered as a lashing out from suspected officers of the Belgian gendarmerie. Just like the first altercation with the police, there were many more, with the dreaded killers making their getaway even with the presence of the police and other law enforcement agencies on site. Some of these near misses by the police, who ought to have stopped the unknown criminals from their marauding, murderous stints, have led many in the public to believe that they were helped by some inside forces. Perhaps this is where it gets scary. Were they helped? If you ask any of the victims still alive, or anyone who lost someone to the Brabant Killers, if the killers were helped by the law enforcement forces, their answer is likely going to be positive. According to most relatives of the deceased, They believe that the investigation into whom these men might be has been largely compromised and manipulated. However, before these murders even occurred, the now reformed gendarmerie were mired in some controversy. On the 9th of November, 1985, on the day of the dreaded robbery of Deleuze supermarket, it was confirmed that there were patrols that passed the supermarket every 20 minutes. In the particular day that the crime took place, the patrols made no effort to confront these dreaded murderers. Also, not very far from the supermarket, a gendarmerie force was stationed. Still, but the police and the force did nothing to prevent this regretful occurrence. And still, the plot thickens. After the heinous crimes of these faceless men against the citizenry of Belgium, investigations commenced. None yielded any result whatsoever, and this can be traced to avoidable mistakes. Most of these mistakes were made because the investigating parties were rivals, operating under different authorities. Details were overlooked. One of the worst oversights resulting from the investigation was the failure to preserve modified cars that were used to carry out the robbery. It is a curious thing to not pay much attention to a piece of evidence like that, but the mistake had already been done. Another mistake, which many people, especially relatives of the victims and some of the victims who got injured themselves, might consider deliberate, was the loss of items with fingerprints. This would have provided a great lead in the investigations, but most of these items were lost along the line, and the leads were lost. Also, the original investigating magistrate had a mind of his own. From the beginning, he was alleged to have manhandled evidence in an unprofessional manner. Added to that, he refused to consider alternatives to his hypothesis, a suspicious move, which only added to the belief of those affected that there were people in authority who do not want the identity of the criminals made known. One other big mistake in the handling of the case was its publicity. The offer of a reward for the identification of the Brabant Killers further messed things up for the investigations. People who had a vendetta against their perceived enemies called to report them. Others called in the hopes of getting the award while not being totally sure of their claims. And still others, perhaps jittery from the revelations, called it any strange sighting. All of these meant the resources for investigations were being spent on leads that led to dead ends. The Westland New Post link. In March 1981, Paul Latinus founded a group that would combat crime faster in Belgium. What he did not realize at the time was that this same group would come to be mired deep in the controversy, that is, the activities of the Brabant Killers. The Westland New Post was a secret paramilitary group that was supposed to move in stealth and with military precision. The crisis that rocked the group suggested that all was not quiet, and the group was not as stealthy as he would have liked. Agents in the new outfit were not new to shooting, and many, in fact, have drawn the conclusion that the murderous three were from this group. In the early 1980s, one of the group, a friend to Madani Buhush, was investigated and arrested for an incident in which he shot into a group of North Africans, leaving one dead. Buhush himself came to be a prime suspect later on, even after his demise. Buhush owned a gun shop and was a gun enthusiast. He was suspected to have committed some violent crimes in the past. In 1986, he got arrested for the murder of his acquaintance, Juan Mendeza. His release in 1988 came as a surprise because the police had found out that he had garages which he rented for storing stolen cars and weapons that he stole from a gendarmerie guard station in Etterbeek. There were also false duplicate car plates and other items that were believed to have been abandoned by the Brabant Killers. There were several TV remotes that he had planned to use in an extortion scheme that would involve IED attacks on a chain of supermarkets just years before the Brabant made the supermarkets their hunting ground. However, all these evidences were deemed inconclusive. Bohush died in 2005, and with him most of the hope of a closure in this case. Marcel Barbier was another WNP member who has been linked to the murderous three. He was an enforcer. It would also seem he was one of the trigger-happy types. In August 1983, after a shooting, he was arrested as a suspect to a double murder that occurred at a synagogue in 1982. Latinos confessed to the police that Barbier and other members of the WNP actually committed the synagogue murders. He admitted that he helped Barbier to get rid of the murder weapon. With his confession, WNP was fast descending into chaos, with some members seeing him as a betrayer for ratting one of their own out. In 1984, Latinos committed suicide. No one knew why. In September 1985, the Brabant Killers gang returned with full force after a period of inactivity between December 1983 and September 1985, as if they harbored grudges against the populace. The massacres of 27 September and 9 November point toward this assumption. The connection with WNP did not end there. It extends still beyond Barbier's arrest and incarceration to his co-accused, Eric Lemaires, also a member of WNP. Lemaires escaped from the country during his trial, but was later brought back. In a Belgian TV program in 2014, he insisted that the leaders of WNP were behind the Brabant killings. One of the men that got arrested after the program was Libert, another member of the WNP whose subordinate was accused of being the Giant. However, he was released after 48 hours with no proof that he was actually one of the murderous three. One of the reasons that the Brabant Killers were linked to members of the WNP was also in the choice of the forested area where they did firearms training. The space came to be used by the Brabant Killers. The coincidences were all so close to be nothing. Still, the three remain elusive, with the special extension to the statute of limitations running out in 2025. In indicating statements, former WNP members have come out to say they were ordered to surveil covertly and garner a report in security arrangements at Belgian supermarkets before the Brabant Killers struck. It appears they might have been working for their murderers unknowingly. Who are they then? Whoever they are patiently waiting for the special revised statute of limitations to run out in 2025 so they can continue to live out their lives without fear of being caught. One of the suspects dates back to the early days of the investigation. His name, Christian Bonkowski. He was a former gendarmerie officer in the Group Diane unit. In the early 1980s, Chris was fired from the Special Force. His brother says he was very bitter after being fired. Then comes the conspiracy theory. Perhaps he was fired so he would be bitter enough to join the Brabant Killers. To further fuel this speculation, after the Deleuze-Daoust massacre, Colonel Pint noticed that the tactics and combat style had a lot in common with the group he set up. He ordered an investigation with this information, but nothing came up. The Diane group was ruled out. However, Chris himself confessed that he was the Giant in the group before his death. It is worth noting that he had already been scrutinized as a suspect, so his latest confession would have come as unsurprising to some. This would have started a process in solving the puzzle, except that DNA and fingerprints have ruled him out as the giant. Patrick Amers and Madani Buhush have both been fingered as being part of the killer gang. Amers' height would make him a fit for the gang's giant, but the crimes he was known for did not have the furious violence and little robberies that were the trademark of the Brabant Killers. Is there hope for solving these crimes? Not very much, I'm afraid. However, with the identities of these criminals still at large, many have come to wonder as to their motives. They seldom targeted the big scores, and they even abandoned what they had stolen sometimes. Still, they killed a lot. Some have speculated that these crimes were targeted assassinations disguised as robbery attempts, especially as they would have targeted other locations. In one of their robberies at the Deleuze d'Alst, during which 8 people were killed, they stole about 200,000 Belgian francs, which is around 5,000 euros. Some checks were found in the Bruxelles-Charleroi canal. On another raid on a restaurant, Auberge du Chevalier, the gang stole only bottles of champagne, some coffee, and a few delicacies. With the extended statute of limitations running down fast, the police have once again circulated the curious picture of a man who might be connected in one way or the other to these crimes. Their identities are uncertain. Their motives are unclear. Just one thing is certain. Time is running out for the Belgian law enforcement agencies.